Okay, can you hear me?
We can now, thank you.
Yep, I had to call him through the phone.
We got there eventually.
All right.
So
Now
yeah,
the next part. Can you see my screen?
it's just loading up. Yes, we can.
All right.
So yeah, over to you.
Hey. All right. Sorry about that, everyone.
That's okay. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so two things before we get started. One, after seeing everybody's presentation today, I realized that I have literally the least professional slide deck of anybody today. So I apologize for that. Hopefully the content makes up for it. Second thing, if you came to watch me talk about curves or sinkies or anything like that, I do apologize. None of that will be covered today, but it's still good, I promise. So when I was thinking about this presentation, I realized that it kind of breaks into two separate topics. One is thinking outside of the Tableau default feature usage box, and that's, kind of using Tableau features in ways they weren't necessarily being designed for. And then the other one is thinking outside of your Tableau box. Yes, it happens to all of us sometimes that we kind of confine ourselves to certain ways of doing things, and it's hard for us to break out of that and see if there's other ways that things can be done. And we'll talk about that more later. So starting out, thinking outside of the Tableau default feature usage box. It's not very catchy, but it's something that we do every day. Yes, sinkies and chord diagrams, things like that, are one example of how we can use Tableau in different ways. But there are also a lot of other simpler ways that we do this. I'm not sure if Kelly Martin was the first person to do it, but she definitely was the first person to popularize it. As you know, that Tableau sometimes has this feature on Axis where you can one-click sort. Unfortunately, that's not something that we always want the user to be able to do because it can kind of screw up the presentation that we're trying to present to our users. So Kelly had this great idea where she floated a transparent text box over the axis so that when users would try to click on it, it wouldn't actually do anything. It's brilliant. It completely solved that use case and opened up a whole lot of doors. The thing is, that use of a text box wasn't what it was designed for. I highly doubt the developers had that in mind when they came up with that feature. But it was a way to use something that Tableau had in a unique, creative way to solve another use case. Anybody that's ever used a text box as a line in your dashboards, a one-pixel line, or anybody that's ever used anything similar to what Pujagandi does with lines and annotations, that's another example. Trellis charts with table calculations. All of these things are simple, they're common, they're used all the time, but they're not exactly what the feature was meant for. It's just something that creative that the Tableau community has come up with and has popularized. So why would we use features in unique ways? Well, a lot of the times it comes to the fact that we have to. We get requirements for our stakeholders that ask us to do things that Tableau maybe can't do right off the bat. It's not an exact, drag and drop or one-click solution. But just because it doesn't support it in one-click solution doesn't mean we can't do it. We just have to think about it creatively. And thinking about features in this way and using features in that way is okay. It's encouraged, in fact, because the more that we do that as a community, the more that Tableau takes notice. The more that Tableau developers see, oh, they're using parameters to filter across multiple data sources. Maybe we should create a feature that just allows us to filter across data sources. So the more that we identify these gaps, come up with creative solutions to fill them, and show that they are valid, they are needed, the more that motivates Tableau to actually create that feature natively. So it's a good thing, and it opens doors. It opens, breaks down boundaries and allows us to push the product further and do things that otherwise we thought we couldn't do. So here's some examples. Big hat tip to Jonathan Drumey on this. He's the one that really introduced me to this concept. And he has a great blog post at drawingwithnumbers.artist.org, and it's called Using an Action Filter as a Parameter. The idea behind this is Tableau dashboards, as far as actions are concerned, there's nothing in the product natively that allows us to have an event listener. So let's say we hover over a mark, we want to do something to that mark when we hover over it. We can highlight and we can filter, we can have URL, but there's nothing that allows us to change like the mark type or do something differently to that mark when we hover over it. But by doing some data manipulation and using some of the features that are existing, we can manipulate that to create something new. Here's an example. I have a bump chart here, and when I hover over this mark, you'll notice that the line changes. It gets thicker, and we get the dots, we get the text marks inside of it. And this is happening within the hover itself. So this is a feature that's not native to Tableau, yet we're using something that's existing within the feature, within the product to create it. Here's another one using connecting scatter plots. So when I hover over it, I'm just going to instantiate a line that connects the scatter plot. And if you want to learn how to do these things, I highly suggest you see Jonathan's blog. And then I also have another blog post on mine that talks about these specifically, about how we can use current features to simulate and bring about new features in Tableau. So I'm going to give an example. I'm going to talk through this step by step on how to create a self-filtering hierarchy drill down in Tableau. So if we think about Superstore, which I'm sure everybody that's on this call or is going to be listening to this recording is familiar with, one of the hierarchies that come with it is category, subcategory, and product. And each of these are different columns within that data source. This type of structure is very popular. It's common in data warehouses where you have facts tables and PKs and FK relationships. And it makes sense from a data management standpoint why it's structured this way. And we have 3 different columns and they break down into lower levels of granularity. And this works fine in a lot of use cases. However, sometimes that can have limitations in Tableau. Tableau can only do so many things with columns. It can do a lot more things with rows. So if I wanted to create, for example, a drill down in Tableau using the default Superstore dataset, what would happen is I run into some issues. I can create a combination of filters, parameters that can get like that, but that's taking the user off the chart into drop downs, and they have to select multiple selections in order to get to the desired output, which stops their flow. It stops them from being, in the zone with the chart. There's also solutions I've seen where people use LODs and containers to kind of pick one category and go to subcategory in a different sheet. But there's an issue with that because you can't usually multi-select if you wanted to. So what do? This feature is not native in Tableau. Well, one of the things we can do is stack the data or scaffold the data. A lot of techniques when we talk about Tableau and we talk about using things outside of the box revolve around this idea of making Tableau long, the data sets long. Because it allows us to act on a single field or attribute with similar values differently depending on another value. So in this example, it'd be the value of my union or my sheet. So when we set up the granularity on the sheet, well, basically what I'm doing here is I'm setting up a row level hierarchy. So anybody that's ever created a hierarchy in Tableau knows it's at the column level. Basically, we're pivoting that idea and making it at the row level instead. And I'm making my rows be equal to the sheet that I've unioned together. So if you can see on the left, I have orders 1, orders 2. This is just the 3 sheets that I've created. And I've just made a simple calculation that just transforms this into an integer, so I can use this later. And the next field, I actually set up the hierarchy. So I'm saying when its sheet is orders, I want to bring my category field. If it's 2, subcategory, and if it's 3, I'm going to bring the product name. So like I said before, this is just setting up a hierarchy, but at a row level instead of a column level. So the next thing I can do is once I have the granularity of my field in place, I need to set up 2 calculated fields that are going to act like filters. And they're actually never-ending filters. So there's a big hat tip I had to send to Josh Milligan. In 2015, he wrote a blog post called Never-Ending Navigation Buttons That Deselect Themselves. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend checking it out. It's fantastic. And though this concept is not a one-to-one exact relationship, the whole idea of it is pretty similar. Basically, the idea is that as I work down the current filter, it changes the value in the next filter. And these kind of work together back and forth so that no matter at what point I am, I can always click and go to another level. So once we have that set up, we're going to build a basic scatter plot. So profit and sales in my columns row shelf. I'm going to put category in my color shelf. I'm going to throw that granularity field onto my label. And then that next filter, I'm going to put that onto the detail shelf. And if you look at my worksheet here, you'll notice that I have category in the viz, I have subcategory in the viz, and I also have products in the viz. All three levels of the hierarchy are currently present on this worksheet. So the next point we need to do is throw this onto a dashboard and create a dashboard object, dashboard action. And what we want to do is we want the sheet to select itself. We want it to filter itself. So the way we can do that is by setting the sheet and then as the source and the target, we choose to leave the filter. And then where the trick comes into place is that we set the next filter as the source field, but we set the target field to the current filter. And if you remember, those are set at different levels. So if I show the demo here, what you can actually see is that as we click through, we're actually going infinitely into these different levels. And I can multi-select on categories, and it's always updating according to that. So what's happening? How was I able to do this, etc.? So the trick is those calculated fields that we set up. So if you notice level 1, which is my first sheet, the current filter is blank. So it's just something that I put in there so that no matter what I'm filtered on that, I can just make sure that I return the categories. For level 2, we break it down to a subcategory on the next filter, but the current filter is set to the category, the granularity is set. For level 3, we break that down further. We set this to blank so they can go back up here, and we set the granularity to the product name. To kind of walk through what's happening, we can see this visually. So when I click on the blank, when I'm on the product level and I go to the next level, it's putting a blank in the filter. This is setting my view at level 1, at my first sheet. Now, because my granularity says when the sheet level is set to 1, bring category, we actually see the 3 categories in my view. And if I click on office supplies, well, that's going to put office supplies into the current filter, which is equal to level 2. And when I'm on level 2, the granularity calculation is set to subcategory. So now I can see the subcategories within that office supply. Once again, if I take that one step further, if I click on binders, for example, it's going to put binders into the current filter, which pushes us to level 3, which means that the granularity is set to the product name. So now we have the products of binders within this. And the next filter is set to blank, so I can restart that calculation. And you can actually see it here in action. If I click office supplies, I go to all of the subcategories in office supplies. I can click appliances and see all of the products within appliances. And then to go back, I can click again, and that'll just bring me up to the top. And it's just click through, and I can click multiple at a time, and I can kind of slice and dice this however I want. All right. Sorry about that. Looks like I got stuck. Okay, so what can we do from this point? Well, we figured out how to do an infinite drill down, right? And that's really great because our users can kind of stay in the flow and they can just click through it. But what about if we want to enhance their experience? So instead of them having to click on the particular mark to get to the next level, what about if we just give them a preview of what's going to be in the next level? So here's an example. When I hover over office supplies, I can bring up a visit tooltip that will show what that subcategory is. And then if I click on that, it persists through to where when I look at storage, I can see the products within that. So I can allow the user to get a quick preview of what's available in that next sheet. And then when they click on that, they can actually interact with that and see the values in itself. So how are we doing this? Well, the trick is the same thing the way we've done before, is we're just going to create a new granularity calculated field, and we're going to basically set up one level up, so that when, instead of having my sheet 1 be equal to category, I'm going to make it equal to subcategory. Sheet 2 is equal to product name, sheet 3 is equal to category. So by creating this and moving it up and adding this on my Vision Tooltip worksheet, when I pass the next filter in, it basically is going to allow this to move to the next level. So that way I can see in my target sheet what's happening at the current state, and then I can see what's happening one level down. So when we think about Tableau features in different ways, it really opens new doors. A lot of the time, sometimes, we run into situations where we think Tableau can't do something, or we think that there's just not an easy solution to it. That's not always the case. We just have to think about things differently. We have to see what features are available and how we can manipulate those to achieve whatever our goal is. Now, I've gone a little fast through this presentation, but if you look through the example, the how-to that I just showed, there wasn't anything really overly complex about it. I used some unions. I used a couple calculated fields, none of which had any LODs, table calcs. There's no sets. I had one dashboard action. All of this is just using basic things and building them on top of each other to create a new functionality. And really, that's a lot about what Tableau is about. When we think about thinking outside of the box and thinking creatively, it doesn't always have to be trigonometry or Sankey's or whatever. Sometimes just how can I use this basic feature in a new way? And how can that new way help me with gaps in my requirements that I'm not able to currently fill? But to do this, we have to get there. We have to learn how to think outside the box, and we have to see features in new ways. So how do we do that? We have to think outside of our own Tableau box. And what happens, I see this a lot, I do it myself, I'm sure others as well, is that sometimes when we learn how to do something in Tableau, we often stick to that method, and we will use it over and over again. We get really fast at it, we get efficient at it, we know it by heart, like the back of our hand. But the problem is sometimes when we do that, we run into situations where we don't know if that's actually the best method. We don't know if, sure, it works on our 1,000-row data set, but will it work just as efficiently on a billion-row data set? And is that the best way? Is there other ways that we can do this that are more efficient or that would open more opportunities for us? So how do we break ourselves of this habit? Well, there's 3 ways. All of them kind of, I think, play into the same central idea, which I'll talk about. One is Workout Wednesday, which you can go to workout-wednesday.com. It's actually run by me and Luke Stanky, and previously by Emma and Andy Kriebel. And it's basically just once a week, we put up a challenge, we put requirements up, and we give you a data set, and we say, hey, try to do this, try to recreate it. And it's a great way to learn. Our goal is always not to intimidate people. Our goal is always to come up with ways and challenges that will allow people to learn something new, hopefully something valuable that they can bring back to work with them. Makeover Monday is another great example. Because everyone's using the same data set, it allows you to see what other people are doing with that data set, and allows you to go to their Tableau public profile, maybe download what they've done and kind of reverse engineer it. So all of these things kind of play into the same central theme of how we can get better. And it's that when we have a community of people doing things, sometimes with the same data set or sometimes the same challenges, it gives us this incredible opportunity to learn how they did something. So one of the things that I kind of processes that I go through to try to make myself better at Tableau and from a design and from a technical perspective is I try to find a dashboard or a challenge that interests me. Whether it was Workout Wednesday or Makeover Monday, or if I just happen to see a visualization online that's just really, really cool. So I find something like that, and then what I do is I attempt to recreate that dashboard. Now, I complete that challenge on my own. So I try to do it on my own style using only the knowledge that I have, Sometimes I'm able to do it, sometimes I'm not, but that's okay. So what I do at this point then is I download those other people's dashboards who have done the challenge, or whose dashboard I'm trying to emulate, and I go through what they've done in their workbook. What calculations have they done? What dashboard actions? How have they set up their data? Have they done anything? Have they pivoted it? So once I've kind of studied what they've done, what I'll do is I'll attempt to recreate the dashboard using their methods, and I'll try to do this by memory, based off of what I learned, because it's teaching me a new way to do something. And then once I've done that, what I do is I take what I've done and I take what they've done and I compare the methods, the pluses and minuses. What's faster, what's longer, was any of them quicker processing time, etc. And then I learn, I document, I try to, see like, oh, what I did was stupid compared to this person's, or, oh, I think maybe my approach was a little bit smarter here. And what that does is it allows us to grow. We can learn how to tackle the same problem multiple ways. As we continue to do that, we can learn how different approaches work better in certain situations, with certain data structures. And then we repeat, we just keep going through this process until the point that we kind of reach this level of expertise where, no matter what the situation is, we know 10 different ways to complete the problem, and we know which method is best for that particular situation, and we can deploy it. But that all starts with us opening up. It all starts with us using the community to our advantage, helping out others, helping out ourselves, and learning, and pushing the boundaries and thinking outside of not only Tableau's box, but our own box. So that's it for me. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask. And if anybody has any questions on the tutorial I'll probably write a blog post on it soon that I'll go into more detailed screenshots as well. So thank you.